Throughout the years, my wife and I often road tripped out to an amazing river called Crystal River. The appeal of this river was its seclusion and underwater caverns that ran throughout it. One thing that you would see a lot when you were there were signs that covered the trees warning visitors not to dive in the caverns, or they would suffer dire consequences. Apparently, on several occasions, drunk people had swam down there, gotten lost, and never found their way out. However, no matter how dangerous it was, the desire to dive down and pop out of the water in a different spot never really went away for some reason. Out of all the river caves that exist in the Crystal River, the most appealing one to me was the one the locals infamously refer to as the Womb. It was the location of at least 10 different deaths over the last decade alone, and had a whole slew of mysterious tales associated with it. Due to all the deaths, there was a fence and caution tape around the surrounding area, and signs saying, "Enter at your own risk." The reason it was so dangerous was there was a tunnel system that branched off from the main chute, which just extended deeper and deeper with no way out to the surface. And the really odd thing was, out of all the people who had drowned in there, not a single body had been recovered. There were even police divers who ventured down into the cave, but due to the caverns being so narrow, they had always turned back unsuccessful. One of the locals we spoke to, an old woman named Delilah, said that she swam down there in the middle of the night one time, and she claimed that she could hear strange yet beautiful sounds coming from deep down inside the treacherous cavern. She said it almost felt as if it was calling for her to swim down inside. So, me being the type of person I am, I decided to bring an iPhone with a waterproof case along, and I would see if I could capture some sort of mysterious phenomenon down there. So I rented dive equipment and got my wife Jessica to wait at the other end of the cavern with a flashlight so that I would know which direction was the way out. She loved coming along on my adventures, even though we had recently found out she was pregnant the month before. Luckily, the water was crystal clear that night, which made it a perfect time to capture anything I saw while I was down there. After I was fully submerged, I looked down and started swimming towards Jessica's light, which was casting out from the opening of the cavern. It was a tighter squeeze than I had expected, but I finally wedged myself underneath the tall stone wall and into the deep cavern. I looked to my left and saw the light from Jessica's flashlight up ahead. Then I checked down the other cavern and could immediately understand why people would get stuck down here. It was definitely a tight squeeze, even for a relatively thin guy like me. Then abruptly the lights all turned off, leaving me in total darkness. I tried smacking my flashlight around, but no matter what, my light just wouldn't come back on. I started to panic. I had no idea which direction to go. That was when I heard an eerie whistling emanating from down inside one of the caverns. In shock, I gazed down it and desperately jostled my gear to try and turn on my iPhone. Finally, I pulled it out in front of me and began to record, but then suddenly it lost power as well. Then all at once, the whistling stopped, and all the electronic devices flickered back on. Aware again of where the exit was, I figured I could venture down into the deeper cavern a little bit and try to investigate the source of the sound. As I swam, I began to realize what the police were talking about with the narrowing of the cavern. It got to a point where I could not continue any further. I tried to squeeze through, and then I started hearing that whistling again up ahead. At that point, I had to get through. I had to see what this was. So I urged further and jammed myself into the dirt and stone, and somehow it shifted out of my way, allowing me to squeeze through. Then, to my surprise, I saw a way out of the water and swam out the top. It was the interior of a cave. I pulled my light out of the water and flashed it around. I didn't see anything though, just an empty dark cave. But then I heard the crying from what sounded like a baby, piercing my eardrums. Then when I pointed my light down into one of the caverns, I saw something unbelievable. It was actually a human baby, lying there on the cold hard floor of the cave. Out of the darkness, suddenly a hand with long, gangly fingers reached out and picked up the baby. I heard what sounded like a burlap sack open up, and the screams from a number of other babies filled the cave. Then the hand tightened the bag again, muffling the screams. The figure then turned and walked back into the darkness from which he came. "Hey, what are you doing with that baby?" I yelled as I hoisted myself up out of the water. I kicked my flippers off and threw my scuba tank down and began to follow him down the tunnel. But once I got down there, I found there was nothing there. The figure had totally vanished. Up ahead, though, I saw the glistening of what appeared to be metal up on the wall. So cautiously, I ventured back into the darkness, and what I saw ahead was even more surreal than the baby. It was a large circular red door held together by wood and circular steel bolts. It appeared as if it led to a dungeon of some sort. I immediately pulled my phone out again and started recording. As I walked forward, I began to hear what seemed to be the faint sounds of screams from a large crowd of people. I stepped up to the doorway and put my ear against it. Then my fears were confirmed. Torturous shrieks and intense yelling pierced my eardrums. One woman's cries in particular seemed closer than all the others to me. The odd thing about it was her voice sounded familiar too, almost like the voice of my recently deceased mother. She kept painfully calling my name, repeating it over and over, begging for help. Knowing it was a bad idea, my hand slowly slid across the door and onto the enormous handle as the agonizing screams grew louder and louder. Thanks for listening to part 1. Go ahead and click the video on the right hand side for part 2, as well as please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more updates.